So today is our Aruba Pensando webinar. We're going to be touching on the three topics of demystifying grants and some of the available resources that can be used to support security projects like Pensando initiative, as well as discussing how Pensando can support some of the security for new threats today and switching to a new network security solution. I have with me Dan Radke, speaking for Pensando, and myself, Said Gordon with DOF Creations. Again, I appreciate everybody joining today. We're first going to touch on some of the ways that grants can support cybersecurity initiatives. And though Pensando is a switch, it has a major impact on what you can do to support security initiatives within your data center and across your network. Dan is with Pensando. He's been with them from the beginning and understands what Pensando is doing to push networking forward in a variety of ways. Dan, do you mind introducing yourself?
Thank you very much. You're correct. My name is Dan Radke, and Pensando was recently acquired by AMD, so it's AMD Pensando now, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So before I pass things back off to you, Dan, I'm going to touch on some grant options pretty quickly, and then leave it to you the rest of the way. And if anybody has questions, you should be able to see a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom. Feel free to put your questions there, and we'll go through those at the end of the presentation. So there are a few options regarding grant funding. Our first element is going to be around local government. I know I recognize some names from state government. For those programs, we're going to want to look at some of the initiatives that have come down from the Department of Homeland Security and some of those other initiatives. For state government programs, those are often very unique in the way that they're going to be used to support security. So that conversation is going to be a little bit different, and we can have that one offline. I'll have our contact information at the end of this discussion. For some of the programs that relate to local government, you can start looking at the state grants. Some of those state grants are going to be available to support security in the data center and how your data center is being built. There may also be some options to support your budget in a way that's slightly different than the normal grant or different financial assistance model, but that'll again be program specific and project specific. You also have the U.S. Department of Commerce grants, which help to support infrastructure development, particularly like your data center, that can help to facilitate economic growth within your local communities. We're also going to have the Department of Energy grants. There have been a great increase in the types of programs and grant funding resources made available to support public utilities, particularly energy, as public utilities have been the target of more and more cyber attacks. So when you're looking at how grants can be used to support a cybersecurity project, looking at what's going on in the news, seeing how some of those other areas are being targeted more frequently and more regularly, that's a good indication of where more and more grant dollars are going to. And also speaking for our attendees that are from state entities, you're going to want to do the same thing. As you're looking at different areas or different types of entities that are being targeted more and more, how does your organization or entity align with those? Do you support them in any way? Are you engaged in oversight of those types of entities, and by extension would have similar types of security concerns as a similarly situated type of organization? So when you're looking at your grant options or grant strategies, looking first and foremost at what areas or what industries are being targeted most, how they're being targeted, and then determining how you align with them. Are you supporting them directly? Are you a similarly situated entity? Are you somebody that is close enough in regard to the work you do or the impact area that you make in your impact area to qualify or to pursue some of those similar types of programs? When we look at education, you're going to want to look at some of the programs that are available today. We have the NSF program, which relates to higher education. This program is sort of a broad opportunity that allows you to support advancements within cyber infrastructure, not just security, but any aspect of technology infrastructure that can be used to support integrated, sustainable, and scalable campus cyber infrastructure. That program, I believe, just closed in March, and there will be another program that reopens in September. So again, that's something that you can use to kind of broadly address your planning initiatives and your strategy as it relates to improving cyber infrastructure across campuses. And then, of course, within K-12, ESSER has been one of the biggest programs, if not the biggest program of the last 3 years. There are a lot of school districts that have utilized those programs already, but there are still many school districts that have available resources. For any IT leader in K-12 that is listening, your district may have resources available. Technology has become a much bigger focus area for ESSER funding over the last 2 years or so, and your resources and your projects will directly fit under what is qualified and permissible as a way to utilize ESSER dollars. And of course, for anyone from colleges, you also have HERF dollars available. That is managed and tracked slightly differently. If you'd like assistance in understanding what your college may have, please just let us know. As we touched on briefly, anytime you're pursuing a grant or trying to determine what grants can be a good fit for you, they're all time specific, project specific, and organization dependent. You're going to want to look at what your window is for getting this project done. If you have something coming up, let's say in the immediate future, 30 to 45 days, a grant may not be your best fit. Grants run on their own time. And if a grant is, say, opening 6 months from now, because you want to get access to that funding today, there's really no way to force that timeline forward. Also, if you want that program to open 6 months later because you want to try to time that application, there's no way to do that. So building sort of a funnel of grant opportunities is something that we suggest for those we work with and something that we do with them. Trying to identify as many different programs that can be used, being of various sizes and funding, various sizes and topic areas is very important. You may have a program that provides you with $100,000 or $500,000 in funding, and another that provides you with $20,000 to $50,000 in funding. Either way, utilizing those resources can be very helpful. Putting together a full funnel and package of resources so you can dip into it is really, really helpful for you. If you need assistance regarding grant research, writing, or reporting and management, please let us know. We have resources and partners that we utilize there. We also have some internal resources that can support you. But again, these programs are time, project, and organization dependent. It's always going to be a unique and tailored approach to identify which programs are going to work for you. Our contact information is in the bottom here, and this presentation will be made available a little bit later this week. But anybody who wants to reach out, please feel free. Dan, with that, I know we kind of touched on funding and how cybersecurity has become a much hotter topic. What are you seeing from Pensando? How is Pensando responding to these greater number of attacks for IT leaders?
Saeed, thanks so much. So we are seeing a significant number of security incidents occurring. And as a result, over the last, I'd say, 5 years, most of our customers are trying to solve how they do east-west security within the data center. There was a time when everything inside the data center was considered safe and secure, and everything outside was considered bad and a threat. That time is now gone. Just because it's inside the data center does no longer mean it is a secure environment, which is part of the reason customers are looking at solutions to do lateral movement isolation, similar to what we're doing today. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Let me see if I can pull this up. Syed, can you confirm you can see my slide?
I can.
Thanks so much. So my goal today is to talk about the Aruba CX10000. It's a network switch, but it's definitely in a new switching category of its own. This switch was developed in concert with a company called Pensando, and I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about who Pensando is and what we've done to truly understand how we got to this point. So a little bit of background on Pensando. Pensando, we are a John Chambers startup. John Chambers ran Cisco for 3 decades, retired in late 2015. And within 6 months, a good portion of his innovation team left Cisco and joined him to start this company, Pensando. For a quick overview of some of those people, you may be familiar with some of those names. The old MPLS team, Mario, Prem, Luca, and Sony, are the primary team that brought the Catalyst switch into Cisco. They developed the Nexus switch, the Cisco UCS Blade Server, Cisco ACI, MDS, through some of those spin outs, spin ins that you may recall. Frank Palumbo ran data center sales for 3 decades. Randy was our CFO for 2 decades. Francis did all the silicon work on the Nexus switching platform. So when I say it is the old Cisco brain trust, it really is. And so we started our company in 2016. We incorporated in 2017. We announced ourselves to the world in 2019. And we started selling our first product in 2021 or late 2020. And what we built is basically a DPU, a data processing unit, or silicon, software on silicon. And we developed it in several form factors. Primarily, the use case was driven for putting stateful security services on silicon. Everything from encryption, micro-segmentation, firewall services, load balancing, storage offload like NVMe over Fabric, Gigamon-like visibility with packet mirroring, NetFlow generation, IP fix, all of that on silicon. And so we've started selling it first to our cloud providers to compete with AWS's Nitro platform, where they initially offloaded a significant number of network and security services onto the silicon, which gave them a huge advantage in the industry. As a result, we started selling this platform. As you can see on the far right, the Pensando column, you can see some of the performance metrics that we got against the top 5 cloud providers in the United States. As a result, these last 3, IBM, Microsoft, and Oracle, have all rebuilt their public cloud offerings with Pensando as the underlying platform. And so these are live and running today. In addition, we've had companies like NetApp do storage offload in their appliances with the same Pensando ASICs for software offload. You may be familiar with VMware's Project Monterey. This was announced 3.5 years ago. It's basically taking VMware's ESX and NSX software and loading it onto silicon on a SmartNIC so that it's no longer consuming up to 20% of the CPU and memory of an underlying server. Now, if I can offload it off of the server onto a NIC card, not only do I get that performance improvement on the underlying server, but I get that huge advantage in security, because I've now created a physical air gap between the server OS and the hypervisor itself. And so this is shipping today. You can acquire this from either Dell or HPE as we speak. Nonetheless, in addition to selling this platform as a cloud solution, we also started selling it to several of our large enterprise customers. As an example, Goldman Sachs wanted to put a firewall on a NIC card in front of every server enterprise-wide. They have done it. It has been deployed in production for several years now and running at scale. And so there are some big examples. Now, what I want to talk about is why did we switch to this smart switch, this Aruba platform and partnership that we've done? The reason is when you develop a NIC card with this type of capability in it, you've got to carefully match it and certify it against an underlying server. And when we came out with this SmartNIC, we had certified against 3 of HPE's servers, of 3 of hundreds of their servers, 2 of Dell servers against hundreds of their servers, none of Cisco and anyone else. And so as a challenge, we had a very limited ability to deploy it to the masses. So we could do it in a customized basis, as I spoke about earlier with Goldman Sachs or Microsoft or Oracle, et cetera. But we couldn't get the masses. So what we knew we wanted to do was deliver stateful security services at the application edge of the network. We knew we were at the right place within the data center. But if loading it onto a SmartNIC was too challenging, as we found it was, what if we just follow that Twin-X cable from the NIC card all the way up to the top rack switch and develop those services there in a smart switch? And that's what we've done, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. And so if you're familiar with the Aruba product portfolio, we've basically taken an Aruba CX8325, a 1RU 48 port switch, and we've embedded within it 2 of those Pensando DPUs. software on silicon, delivering stateful security services to create a security appliance that is deployed in the data center. And we call it the Aruba CX10000. And so this switch has been selling for a little over a year now. In that time frame, we've gotten well over 200 customers. And we have, with pending demand generation behind it, we've grown our quota for 2023 over 10x. So we have been getting significant interest and excitement about it. Let me take a minute and talk to you for what exactly it is. This switch, let's see if I can find it here, is basically a top of rack switch. It could be a leaf switch or your first aggregation switch within the data center, but it was built and designed to be a top of rack switch to deliver stateful security services at the application edge of the network. It's a 1RU switch, 48 ports that are server facing, 1, 10, or 25 gigs, as well as 6 network facing ports that can be 40, 50, or 100 gigs. I mentioned earlier that it is a base platform from the Aruba CX8325, which is the same T3 Broadcom switch ASIC that's used in the Nexus switching platform, the Juniper switching platform, and the Aruba switching platform. There's nothing unique about that switch in that respect, but it is the 2 Pensando DPUs that we've embedded within it that are delivering those stateful security services. That is what is the most exciting component within the switch. So keep in mind, this is a what we're describing as a security appliance within a network switch in the data center. And so what components do I get of the security within the security realm? So keep in mind, when you've had a malware or virus attack in the data center, it almost always comes because somehow some malware got embedded in a server in the data center. And from there, it began to laterally explore. And as a result, we've had several companies come out over the last 5 to 7 years to try and solve that lateral spread within the data center. In the software space, some examples are Guardicore, Illumio, VMware NSX, where they're focused not on perimeter-based firewall, but on server-to-server traffic migration and locking down that type of movement within the data center. The challenge here is not only are these solutions very expensive, but they require you to put an agent on the server within the data center. Most of the customers we've talked to have given us feedback that I can't put any more agents on my servers. It's filling up. It's taking too much of the resources from my server just to run those agents. And the expense of some of these solutions are not only quite large, but reoccurring year after year. And that subscription-based model can be a challenge to some of our customers. There are also hardware-based solutions that exist in the marketplace, Fortinet, Cisco ACI. Some of our customers actually use a physical firewall to do isolation, usually in zones, protecting these 20 or 200 servers from these different 20 or 200 servers, and create zone-based isolation models. And we can do that with either a macro or a micro-based segmentation solution, so that we can give you isolation all the way down to the VM container, or whatever workload you have running within that environment. So in a nutshell, everything I've talked about to this point has been data center focused on how we basically deliver a leaf solution or a top of rack switch to deliver stateful security services at the server edge or the application edge of the data center. And in that respect, it works very, very well. But we've also had other customers come to us and say, hey, if I need in a campus or retail or military base environment, I need a switch and I need a firewall. You've got both built in. Can I use it in that environment? And the answer is absolutely yes. And we also have a handful of very large financial institutions that are using us for simple DDoS protection, putting us in front of a cloud service provider circuit or an ISP circuit, and simply turning on DDoS protection for the on-premise or your your cloud cage or wherever you may need that type of resource. And so we're getting all of that there. So let me take a quick second to talk about where I would deploy this or implement this within the data center. And the reason is I get a lot of customers that come to us and say, well, what if I've got an all Cisco or all Juniper environment? Can I deploy this as a leaf and my Cisco spine remains in place? And the answer there is absolutely yes. So as a leaf switch, it can absolutely integrate with a Cisco spine or Juniper spine, Arista spine, Extreme, etc. It doesn't really matter. Two, it obviously integrates well with any underlying server platform, whether it's Dell, HP, Cisco, etc. So there's no integration issues there. And if it's only in a portion of my data center, it still works well with other leaf switches. So as an example, I am inspecting traffic as it is going ingress or egress, whether it's coming from the network side or the workload side. I can inspect that traffic and do firewall policy rules against that traffic at the same time, so that even if my traffic is originating from another server or rack elsewhere in the data center, I can still inspect that traffic as it approaches my workload that I am protecting. And then I've had some customers come to me and say, well, what if I've already got something in place like Guardicore, Lumio, NSX? Can I still use this solution? And the answer is absolutely yes. Let me give you a quick example. If you're using VMware NSX to protect your underlying VM sitting on a server, let NSX protect that underlying VM, and we can add a secondary layer of security to protect everything else. Everything else being other hypervisors that are not VMware, or bare metal environments, or Kubernetes or container environments, or your backup or your storage, all of those environments, even the NSX VM that's sitting on that VM kernel remains unprotected. So we can actually protect the VM kernel that's hosting NSX, and we can protect the management path between that NSX component and vCenter or the NSX manager. So there are significant things we can do within the data center in addition to what security you're already getting. So with that, I want to make sure nobody misunderstands or misrepresents. We are not replacing your perimeter-based firewall or your overall data center, your big $1 million Palo Alto firewall. That's not what we're doing. But we are absolutely implying that we can add or replace or supplement firewall services for the east-west environment, for the server-to-server traffic or the VM-to-VM traffic within your data center environment. That is what we're really good at, and that's what we've been delivering. The switch is also available. It's in inventory. Today, it's shipping approximately 2 weeks after PO order processing. And so getting your hands on one of these switches is not a challenge. And then the last thing I want to talk about in this environment is where I could install this switch in the environment. So I've got about half of my existing users installing it as a top-of-rack switch or as a leaf switch in their environment. So as their existing leaf switch or top-of-rack switch comes up for replacement or refresh, you look at this Aruba top-of-rack switch to simply take that place and provide those stateful security services we talked about earlier. The other half of my customers are not touching their network fabric. They've got a network team in place that says, look, my network's fine. I don't need to replace my top-of-rack switch. My leaf switches are okay, leave them alone. And the security team is saying, listen, I've been looking for a security solution similar to this. If we're not going to replace the top-of-rack switch, I'm going to insert this security appliance between the top-of-rack switch and my servers and turn on stateful security services at that point in the network. And so at least a third of my customers have been deploying it in this manner. And so I want you to keep in mind of where you can install this solution within the data center, where it does make sense, whether it's data center or a retail environment, et cetera. But those are the types of solutions that you can deliver within that architecture. As far as our roadmap solutions, if you think about the days of old, when we had ASICs that were imprinted with software, and to get an upgrade, you had to either replace the ASIC or the appliance that it sat on. We don't have those issues anymore. It is a customizable, programmable ASIC within the switch. And so as you upgrade the firmware on the underlying network appliance, the switch itself, the software within the Pensando DPU gets updated as it goes with you. And so today, in our initial release, when it was introduced, was layer 3, layer 4 firewall services. And shortly after, with the next image upgrade, we introduced DDoS protection. And this current month, we're introducing large-scale NAT. When I talked earlier about some of the metrics of what you can do with NAT, the largest, the only other NAT solution provider, network switch appliance, is Arista today. But they're doing it in memory. And as a result, you get limited ability to run NAT services in that environment. Because we're doing it in silicon and the hardware, we have a significantly different scale of what we can deploy for NAT services. And then at the end of this summer, we are intending to introduce VPN tunneling or IPsec encryption. And so as you deploy these solutions, if each individual security appliance has 800 gig of firewall throughput or IPsec encryption for tunneling purposes, if you pair them in an active state like VXLAN, in this case, you've now got 1.6 terabits of firewall capability per rack within your environment. And if you consider what would a 1.6 terabit firewall cost on its own, this becomes a very cost-effective solution. So let me stop there and ask, are there any questions, thoughts, comments? I see there's some chat notices, but Saeed, I've not been reading them as they go. I can read them now.
Not a problem. I'll read them. So we have two questions. One is, how does this product track virtual machines as they move, say, across a stretch cluster during a migration?
So it does work with VM motion. So as long as you have these stateful firewalls above both sets of servers where the VM motion occurs, you're covered. If you have the CX-10000 in a portion of your data center environment and VM motion occurs outside of that, then I can't solve that issue. But as long as it's in a rack where the CX-10000 resides, yes, we work with VM motion.
Okay. I also have another question for you. How can I use this switch if I have an all Cisco data center?
So it's it works well in that environment. So we have integration testing with Cisco, Extreme, Juniper, Arista, all of the big players out there. So that if I were to put this as a top of rack switch to connect to a spine, a Cisco spine, or another competitive spine, it works just fine. So the big component there, the conversation is, does the integration have any challenges? Do I lose anything from my network fabric? The answer is no, you don't. At the same time, I've had network managers come to me and say, but I really only want to deploy it as a security appliance. I don't want to change my existing network fabric. And in those cases, you deploy it between your leaf switch and your server, and then you call it secure compute or a distributed firewall solution. And this is not a foreign concept for most network teams. As an example, anybody that's deployed Cisco's UCS Blade server, there's a fabric interconnect that resides between the Nexus top of rack switch and the UCS Blade server. That is a network appliance between those two. This would be very similar. I'm inserting a network appliance that's going to do security services. In this case, distributed firewall.
Okay. I have two more questions. Is there an Aruba security device, or is this an Aruba security device or a Pensando product? and who do I buy from?
Oh, great, great. It's definitely an Aruba product. So Pensando partnered with Aruba to insert our technology into this platform. But this is absolutely an Aruba product sold by Aruba and Aruba channel partners and supported by Aruba after the fact. Pensando is just working very closely with Aruba for software roadmap, future capabilities, as well as for tax support. When support issues come in, it all goes through Aruba, but Pensando is sitting in the background as well.
And this is Viv Gordon. You can all purchase from DOF. We have a bundle put it in place that we can send each person who requests pricing the discounted bundles, and those can be sent out immediately after this call.
Viv, I actually was gonna ask Dan to go through two of the bundles we put together. I'm gonna share my screen now. Viv, if you could lead in that real quick. Viv, Dan, do you guys mind walking through this first bundle? This is the front to back airflow.
Yeah, we'll have Dan walk through the technical part of it. As you can see in the notes section, these products can be purchased from the Aruba NASPO on the Aruba NASPO contract. This is the bundled discounted pricing, so you can see that it's very, very heavily discounted, and we've worked with Aruba and Dan's group to give this offering. But with that, Dan, please give the technical overview of this.
Absolutely. So basically, this is showing you can get two top-of-rack switches. Typically, they're deployed in pairs for under $60,000. So it is a very competitive, basically for the same cost of any other top-of-rack switch within your environment. Now you're getting a security appliance with it that comes with firewall services, VPN tunneling capability, and telemetry that you have never gotten from any other layer 2, layer 3 switch in the marketplace. So they're offered, as you can see in the first line, is either front to back or back to front airflow, depending on how your data center was built. Then the rack mount kit, traditional support. The fourth line, or fifth line down with the CX software, that is the Pensando software on it. It's discounted like everything else is, and it's a one-time software. So unlike some subscription softwares like VMware NSX, we're not going to come back to you next year for another component. It's perpetual. You buy it, you own it, it's yours. And as long as you still have support on the appliance and get software images down the road, you'll keep getting more and more functionality that we deploy. The last line item here, I should cover quickly, which is Aruba Fabric Composer. And Aruba Fabric Composer is an Aruba product that came from an acquisition about 5 years ago from a company called Plexi. And they built a centralized management solution that we love, the Pensando team. As you can imagine, this Pensando team is very Cisco oriented. We have a very strong Cisco history. And the Aruba Fabric Composer, I would say, is very Cisco-like. And so anyone with comfort in using Cisco gear, networking gear, within 30 minutes, this would be intuitive and you're off and running. Two big reasons why we recommend this platform. One, as you deploy these CX 10,000 switches, you're deploying security services throughout your data center. You need a way to manage this environment. Customers doing it today can do it in one of basically three ways. Pensando gives you a user interface called Policy and Services Manager with the platform. It comes with the switch and the CX software, and you can manage the security side of that solution from there. We have other very large customers using scripting technology like Python or Ansible to manage that environment. That's a very custom type solution that they have built themselves. And finally, the one I recommend the most is Aruba Fabric Composer. And there are several reasons why I suggest that. One, it's a fantastic solution for managing your network environment. Two, it manages everything from the Pensando environment. Three, it gives you complete role-based access control, where you can decide users have control of this network or this portion of the network, or this side of the security house, or this portion of the security house. You can take it all the way down to a VM or an application. It is very user-friendly as far as how to give command and control and how to give just user visibility without being able to edit, change, or write code. And then finally, there is an ecosystem partner relationship that is already in place with Aruba Fabric Composer, such that there are integrations today with VMware, Nutanix, ExtraHop, Splunk, Gigamon, so that let's say I'm running a VMware environment and I have VM tags on my VMs and I want to build firewall policy against those tags. This solution makes it very easy for me to do it because all of those VM labels, tags, and names are ingested into this environment. And then the Pensando can build policy rule sets against it. So let's say I've tagged a VM with dev, and I want to keep my dev environment separate from my prod environment, my production environment. So I can build a rule policy for all of dev. And once I've done that, as I deploy new VMs that are tagged dev, they automatically inherit this policy rule set for the dev environment so that they are zone-based, can't communicate outside of that environment. And likewise, then if I remove that tag and I can add another tag to it, I can call it my, let's say I don't want my science lab to have interaction with my English department. I can build policies to keep them isolated. And as I promote VMs or move VMs or retag them, rename them, I can migrate them within policy without changing anything. Makes it a really easy way. And so that ecosystem relationship, that partner relationship is something we really like. So we recommend it and include it into the offering.
Dan, just to follow up, I know you've touched a couple of times on the Cisco history and the Aruba partnership. But for, let's say, a CIO or a technology leader who has a team that doesn't have Aruba and Cisco or doesn't have Aruba and Cisco experience, what's that time to get accustomed to Pensando if they're bringing this into, an environment that's never seen something like this?
Yeah, so it's definitely the Pensando security side is new. So just like if you were deploying Illumio as a brand new platform or Guardicore as a brand new platform, it's something you would have to learn. VMware NSX and Cisco ACI are both extremely complex. We've had too many customers trying to go down the path and say it's just too architecturally complex. I call uncle. What we think we've delivered here is the easy button at a very low cost. At basically the cost of any other network switch, I now get access to all of this security capability. But there is absolutely a learning curve. You've got to, because you have access to do things you could have never done before. Given that, our team, Pensando, will absolutely support DOF, and DOF will continue to provide support for you to make sure your deployments are successful. I can guarantee my support for you and your customers at least through Christmas of this calendar year, where I'm committed to make sure not only just pre-sales, but in post-sales, so that your deployments are successful. But there is it's a different platform. It doesn't look exactly like an Arista switch or a Juniper switch because of that Pensando software that's in there. Given that, I can give you a demo in a future time, and we can go through the user interface and you can see how easy it is to deploy policy or to update network security solutions within your environment. We intentionally drove this for user ease. It is a very simplistic way to introduce network policy to the edge of the data center.
Gotcha.
Dan, I think that's a really good segue. I hadn't even thought of it, but I think we should do webinar 2.0 for the people listening here, and even some of the people who may have missed it. We're going to send the webinar out to them, but we should follow this up maybe next month with a demo, Dan, so that people can see it in real time.
We would love that.
And we did have someone in the chat ask for that same thing, Viv, a webinar to see the full user interface as a demo.
Happy to do
We'll
that.
schedule that with Dan.
Not a problem. Dan, was there anything else you wanted to touch on today?
I think that's everything. Obviously, if anybody wants to go into a further conversation or talk about this Aruba CX 10,000 with Pensando software capabilities, you would reach out to DOF or Said, and obviously he knows how to get a hold of me.
Absolutely.
And Dan, in the interim, we have a customer here who does a lot of, we do support them in a myriad of ways. I think we would like to do a one-on-one demo with them. So when we get off here, we'll loop you in with that customer as well, and we can see how we can do a one-on-one. But we definitely want to do a webinar, I would say probably the end of next month, as we call it, the 2.0, Pensando 2.0, doing this very same thing. Let's demo the product so that the participants here and others can see exactly how it works.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone, we thank you for your time today. Again, as we briefly touched on the grant process and trying to make sure it's a little bit clearer in how grants operate and some of the steps that are required into identifying one that'll fit for you. But again, we can support you in that process, whether you're a state agency, local government, education, particularly in healthcare as well. There are a wide variety of federal programs available to support cybersecurity, your initiatives regarding your network and your data center. But everything is going to be specific and tailored to you. So if you need somebody to help you to go through that process and take the time with you, we're also here at the DOF team to support that as well.
Said, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate the chance to talk.
All right. Thank you, Dan. And everybody, we finished a little bit early today. You'll have about 15 minutes back of your time. But again, we appreciate your time today.